Nadia, for your opening remarks, and obviously for John for putting me on this pedestal that I now will live up to. So it's great to be here. And a few months ago, I spent some time with John on a podcast. I'd come back from Mozambique. We'd been at a conference in Mozambique, and we talked about the importance for the development of learning programs for Africa. And obviously Nadia with the group has taken that on. And so for me to be able to share some of my insights today are very important. What I'll try to do, as John mentioned, there will be some polls, but also please feel free, as I'm going to be spending most of my time with the slides, I won't get access to the Q&A as much as John and Nadia. So please, if there are things that you want me to stop or John can interrupt me, no problem with that. So use as you can the chat. So what are we going to try and look at today? Let's put some understanding behind the project here. How we'll first look at competitive advantage. What is to be competitive? And then this concept of how to sell. I know we're going to have some interesting discussions, I'm sure, between online, offline, and how that impacts in the African market. And then how do we come out of this? How do you re-energize the brand principles within Africa? If we start, for those on the line, and of course this is new for all of us. I've since April of the university, we went to Zoom. So obviously it's, we're more used to being able to walk around and share ideas. But I think for those on the line that were in our industry back in the 90s, and those that were studying, I came out of university in 93. Competitive advantage in 90s was all about, there were really two main authors that really shook up the world in the 90s. Michael Porter, you probably remember the work coming out of Harvard, and he talked about cost leaders, focus, and differentiation. And then we had Tom Peters, a consultant from McKinsey's that wrote a most fantastic book called In Search of Excellence. And his idea was that the world was so unpredictable that thrive on chaos. And we're all thriving on chaos. For those of us who've been in the industry through 9/11, through SARS, through the financial crisis, what's been thrown at the industry this time is unprecedented. And I think if I hear that word again, I think we're all a little bit fed up. The reality is that we don't know where we are, but we need to define what we might look like. Let's go back to the 90s. If I said to you, who was cost leader in the 90s? Southwest, what Herb did down in Dallas with the love in the air and what they were able to do in terms of putting Southwest as a real low cost that everybody trusted, supported, and really understood. Who was differentiating? I was fortunate to spend some time with British Airways, and probably if you look back to the early 90s with what was happening with Club World, maybe BA was probably one of the best airlines in differentiation. And then Porter talked about focus, those businesses that take one part of a vision and really push it. And there were some niche airlines, those who have US experience. Midwest Express out of Milwaukee came up with this red carpet service vision, trying to fly business-only aircraft. And there was, in all of this, there were principles that said, we know where we're going and we know what we're doing. If I ask you today, who is a cost leader? Ryanair? Probably. Probably Ryanair is being able to go above and beyond all the other airlines in managing costs. Differentiation? I don't know. Emirates? Maybe on the business prospect. But it's not as it was. To talk today about differentiation, I think people feel that we're all the same. And who's focusing? Is there really any focus from aviation in terms of fulfilling one segment? Private jets? Maybe the private jet business has been able to focus. So coming back to what Porter and what Peters were saying back in the 90s, the whole point of trying to be competitive was to know who you want. Who are your customers? Obviously, we all lived the last 5 years of aviation very comfortably. Business was good. Airlines were growing. Passenger numbers were up. And I presume at some point, everybody was attractive. Why I say now, who is differentiating? Who is focusing? Everybody wanted everybody. Now, is that reality as we come out of this crisis? How might we think about who we attract? We need to withstand pressures. What I would say here is all about confidence. If Peter's talked about thriving on chaos back in the 90s, what do we need to talk about now in 21? How can we come out of this to say we're confident that we are different, we're confident that we are better? And thirdly, the whole point of competitive advantage was about strengthening who you are. What do you stand for? What did you stand for in 2019 is probably not the same now what you'll stand for in 2021. So it's time for organizations, and not just airlines, you know, this masterclass is working in the aviation industry, but you could imagine in most organizations, they're all trying to understand who is attractive, how do we make sure that we differentiate, and how do we ensure that we come out of this stronger than those that are with us. Lowest cost. I think, you know, this is worrying. It's very easy for airlines to think about direct and digitalization. But that's not what we were doing back in the 90s. The strategy was all about customer experience, customer service. How do you see customer experience and customer service in a doom loop strategy of cutting costs? Of course, as I said, and what Porter said is that there can only be one cost leader. There can only be one cost leader. And if that's Ryanair, then let Ryanair win. Because how do you compete with Ryanair if there's only one winner? Can we have more than one? And can we challenge what Porter said in the 90s? That you can have multiple cost leaders, and those multiple cost leaders can all have their own ways of working. But if we're thinking about cost leadership, what the vision and the strategic thinking said is, it isn't for everybody. Know that you can do it and make sure you deliver it. So lowest costs is one way. The other side is to be different. Why to be different? There's another wonderful researcher, a philosopher, psychologist, more at the end of the 90s, Edward de Bono, a Maltese gentleman. He talked about there's no such thing as competition. You run your own race. Why would you follow others? Create differentiation, and then the others will follow you rather than you following them. And this idea about how do we try and run our own race? Why are we worried about what the others are doing? As I mentioned, be confident in what you're doing and then see how that might come through. Bring that to the African market. And John, please, if there's any comments coming through whilst I ask this question, who is a cost leader in Africa? Who is differentiating in Africa? Where might we see the vision of Porter's strategy be applied in 2021? Is there scope for low-cost development? We've seen some of the opportunities. We've seen people like FastJet, EasyJet Group moving into Africa, believing you can take the model of Europe and put it in a different continent. We know that there has been some of the transitions of Jumbo Jet from Kenya and trying to create a low-cost vision. Is that really working? And of course, what we see in South Africa with Flights of Fair, Kalula and Mango, and shaking up the domestic market and really trying to position, is there scope for cost leaders? Who's differentiating? Who is making an experiential project? Who is really driving differentiation in Africa? Ethiopian Airlines?
Sorry,
yeah, John,
in, Gavin.
Please jump in,
Yeah.
because I say I'm just looking at the screen. I don't have the chance to get to the Q&A as much.
Yeah, this isn't my opinions, but I'm seeing some interesting stuff coming through on the chat. So Ethiopian, of course, is coming up, and they're able, I would expect, both on differentiation, but also cost because of their economies of scale. They're getting competition because, first of all, they've got a strong brand. They've got 70 odd years of history. And they've got a lower cost base because they've got the economies of scale. That's a bit of a challenge. We also have a great comment from Charmaine Airlink, of course. That's Airlink down in South Africa. have found a niche that they've carved out through Roger Foster down there. Fly Sapphire, of course, which you mentioned, doing the low cost offering down there in the domestic markets and sticking to that with one aircraft type. Lots of people, there's obviously conversations about Africa World Airlines, which is one of the private owned airlines over in Ghana, who we talk about a lot because of their structure and the way they operate. Jerry Max has suggested Rwandair as well. So there are some good ideas coming through.
Yeah, I suppose, and thank you for that, John. And back to the audience. Can you be a cost leader and differentiate? I mean, does one equal the other? Are we better to say less is more on differentiation? Let's try and think about what it is to go back to the good days of experiential service development. Is there a market demand for that in 2021? These are things that will come on and explain. Maybe what I'm going to show you, some people might feel that this is not the correct experience, but are we now at the situation that the airline industry is purely commoditized? Is it like selling toothpaste? I tell you, if you work for these companies, if you work for Unilever, or if you work for Procter & Gamble, the amount of research that these companies put into making toothpaste is often a lot more than airlines put into producing seats or working up customer experiences. The power of psychographics, the power of understanding what it is that customers look for in FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods, is a very interesting parallel for our industry. They're commoditized. Is the aviation industry commoditized? Have we created the perception that there's no difference? Many years ago, again, for the people in the audience in the mid-90s, on distribution, there was a company that came to the market that had a market cap 3 times Coca-Cola. They were called Priceline.com. They are now bought by Booking. Priceline.com allowed passengers originally in North America to allow people to name prices. They basically said there is no difference between American, United, and Delta. There's no difference between BA and Lufthansa. And you know what? These airlines place their inventory on Priceline.com. And what they did is, exactly, we're the same. We have no difference. Because if the passenger is prepared to buy on price, all of the information, all of the differences that you've created through your brand and through your values is just now relative to what is your worth. And this is something we'll look at later with value and value pricing. So I'm trying to highlight that we've had a period in the 90s where we really tried to differentiate or focus. During the period, we've gone into a different level. We've created no difference. Or if we have created difference, maybe we've not been confident in explaining it and promoting it and marketing it. Have airlines been a little bit scared to say just how good they are? The good old days of British Airways saying the world's favorite airline. Is it right today for an airline to use such metaphors? Or will that open up people to say, no, you're not? And it's about having the trust and the confidence to be able to believe that you are different and that you're not running a race with everybody else. And that's one of the reasons when you're in a pandemic, we can talk about coming through this. This, in the good old years, would be called managing adversity. What strategic thinking do you do when we're in adverse conditions? Maybe the adversity, this is so adverse, as Peter said, thriving on chaos. The only thing predictable about the future, it's unpredictable. So we don't know where we're going, but we've got to kind of feel, how do we get through this particular challenges? So where might we think about differentiation? How might we invent ourselves? The first thing to ask yourself is, where are we now? How do we see ourselves at the moment? Where do we see ourselves? Who are our customers? Who could be our customers? And how do we ensure that what we need or what they need, we really understand that? Then we talk about coming out of this. This is storytelling. This was another buzzword in the last few years. We need to tell stories. We need to re-inform passengers what we do. We don't just fly aircraft. We provide experiences. Coming back to that strategy of commoditization, those of us that have been lucky enough to work for an airline, it's an unbelievable experience to go to an airport and see people meeting each other in the good old days where we could hug each other. And then I say to you, go and work for a company that produces washing machines. What experience is there in producing a washing machine? Do we get out of bed to want to work and market washing machines? I'm sorry if people are in that industry. We live in an industry, we work in an industry that's all about an experience. And we're talking about not creating differences. We're talking about airlines being similar. Go to the retail industry and look at Walmart, the wonders of what happened with Walmart about creating your own identity. Don't copy others. Try to understand. So recovery is all about storytelling. Going back to what you did well and thinking, how do we put that through to the future? And how do you win in the new normal? Of course, $64 million question. But I think it's all about consideration. No, it's all about conversion. We need to start, and I probably will be getting questions about how do we get governments, airlines, stakeholders together to be able to make sure that we have a common vision on where we can go. But we need to think about converting those potential. How do you think passengers feel today? They're anxious. They're anxious. They're anxious in two ways. They're anxious about what might happen when they travel, but they're also anxious because they keep not being able to travel. So the mindset is, I'd love to travel, but I'm not ready. How can we use storytelling to try and build or reduce that anxiety? Anxiety is not good in marketing. We don't want people to feel that they're scared, but we don't want to be too overconfident that people feel that this is blind optimism. And the opportunity at the moment is all about reducing risk. What I can offer and how my offer makes you feel better than what one of my competitors can offer. It's about simplicity. People need to feel that brands are talking to them as if they are humans. We shouldn't be shouting. We shouldn't be saying how great we are. It's time to reflect, build on our principles, understand what those values are that got us to where we were back in 19, and think about how we take those forward in 21. Remove anxiety. The worst thing we can have is people not wanting to travel. And then when they want to travel, they're just seeing everybody the same. And that's where we have to differentiate. Cost leadership is great, but I keep saying there's one cost leader. The others, we need to really think about differentiation. And differentiation doesn't mean about having the best and about then the highest price. It's about trying to give individuals a belief that there is competition, but there's no real competition. It's time to focus. It's time to understand what is happening, and it's time to vote. So, John, I open up, please, the first poll where we hopefully can ask our audience today, what is it that airlines need to focus on to gain competitiveness? Is it about being lowest price? Is it about innovation? Is it about diversification? Is it about mergers? Is it about advertising? Or is it about trying to grow your customer base? Please express your beliefs, and then John will share with us some of the results. And any other questions, John, that have come out of that first part?
Yeah, okay. Well, there's an interesting comment coming through, which has come through from Noel, who's the commercial director over at Askai there in Togo, and he just said the example of the toothpaste industry is a bit far-fetched compared to African aviation. Simply, the operating costs of providing a seat for an airline in Africa is so high; it's 45% higher than the world average, that all the service providers reap the gains more so than the airlines. So the airlines aren't left with much, which then doesn't give them the cash to invest in R&D and then improve their competitive advantage, which is how it all kind of links itself. So yeah, we've had about half the people attending vote, so we'll give it another 30 seconds. But if you want to respond to that quickly, Gavin, and then we can...
I think you're absolutely right. If you've got conditions, but you've got people, and we're a people business, and it's your people that can make a difference. And it's the training, and it's why Aeronad is understanding that there are principles that we've got to put our people back as being the difference. It isn't just about hardware. It's about the difference. As I've said, we're not selling washing machines. We're selling emotions and we're selling experiences. And the importance of getting the people back. Again, coming back to the work, if you look at one of the Harvard case studies of BA, not 90s, 80s, putting people first. Colin Marshall. I ask any of you, Google Colin Marshall, putting people first. It was a pioneering project to allow the people in that airline to understand how the airline worked together. And the togetherness made BA for some time to be the world's favorite airline. Don't underestimate your people. It's the people that can be part of that focus. And it's that I hope we can try to, build back trust through the experience. And the communication and the people will come back to that. So I think that, it's always difficult to say that we throw money at hardware, but also understand that it's the people that can make a difference. Kaplan and Norton, some other great guys from Harvard, the balanced scorecard, 3 measures: innovation, people, and customers. Kaplan and Norton said, make sure you actually do a customer and employee opinion surveys. Ask your employees if they like where they work. And get those results and check them. And don't just throw them away because, we don't like my boss. No, learn from that. Because it's that, again, why people do great is that, happy staff, happy customers. I don't like that. It's a little bit degrading. But the whole concept is about trying to build the principles that your people will make a huge difference. And that's what I was saying about Walmart. Walmart said, don't forget, at the end of the day, everybody can sell products, but it's the way you sell those products that makes it different.
That's great. Yeah, thanks.
The vision, right. The vision is something that says the customer is always right. Rule 1. Rule 2, if in doubt, reread rule 1. The customer is always right. So what are we doing, John?
Okay, I'm going to share the results with everybody and you can just have a quick look at that. There you go, Gavin.
So
there's your answers.
Is basically at 48%. And then so let's take innovation and around the differentiation. So I could argue here we're at about 48% of people talking about differentiation and 18% of the audience talking about low cost. It's good to see that, because I think what we're saying is to get out of this challenge and reinvent ourselves, we've got to think about what we can do. Of course, how do we innovate? As we said, is it about the hardware or do we innovate within the software? Okay, so at that point, let's jump. Let me just close the poll off my screen.
Back to you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on. What are we saying here? Well, one of the ways to try to be different, it's about change the narrative. I think, hence what you've said about innovation and thinking about doing things differently. I think it's also about stop saying what we've done. I think what becomes important is about trying to present what the passengers want to hear. What is it that can help to reduce that anxiety? The first key area is, we talk a lot about features, who we are. We like, companies, not airlines, everybody, we like to say who we are. We like to talk about ourselves. But is that what our customers really want to be hearing today? Do they want to hear who we are? Or is it that they would like to understand what makes a difference to them? That's that little bit about bringing some of the experience of your employees into the discussion, the storytelling. Try to build up that vision that the benefits are not just in your seat or in your frequency, but it's in the whole experience, the way that we understand the passenger journey, the way that we try to use empathy and get closer to our passengers. Okay, again, now with social distancing, this word of closeness, but closeness not as a distance, but as an actual understanding, the ability to feel and be in the shoes of the customer, what it's like to be them, and understand that. And again, there are great examples of how other industries, managers in other industries are encouraged to be customers. Spend time with your passengers, spend time with your travelers to really understand what it is that we deliver and where can we change the narrative. Don't tell, sell. This is what becomes important. And this concept of consultative selling, trying to think differently about them, what it is that they're buying. Are they just buying travel? Are they just buying A to B? Well, then it's the toothpaste example, because the toothpaste is cleaning teeth. It's not giving me emotions. But then it is, because the flavors will bring some psychological, psychographic thinking. So the reality here is that we have to think about building that benefit structure, how to really present the narrative in a different way. Why buy? What is your difference? Coming back to what you've said in the poll, what is it the innovation can help to try and educate our potential passengers? And I think, you know, we're going to talk a little about the whole concept of driving the experience forward, and how that then comes through. So the question here is really how to move the narrative from price and telling to the narrative of experiences and selling, but selling in a way that we provide a differentiation, perceived differences are what becomes important. Michael Kotler, again, for those of you who have studied marketing, the 4 Ps, this is 20, 30 years ago. Is it right to talk about the 4 Ps in 2022, 2021? Probably not. Let's try and understand what we talk about. What is product? No, as I've just said, don't tell me, sell me. Give me solutions. It could be the solution is about your competitiveness is frequency. Use it. Use it. If you've got something that you don't think your second best competitor has, that's the selling, not the telling. It's how you change the way you communicate that becomes important. It isn't so much about trying to talk about the hardware, the tangibles. This lovely word of intangibles becomes very important. With solution selling, we're not selling products. We're selling solutions. And how can our industry support solution selling in a way to reduce people's anxiety of travel? That's the challenge. If we can, of course, vaccines and things will change the mindset, but this stage, what is really important is to think about going back to your marketing teams. There's a wonderful, you know, this is why, you know what, it's great that we can be on Zoom, but there's nothing better to get you all in the room. One simple exercise is to rank attributes of what you think you do. Attribute testing is one of the best ways that market research companies will work with qualitative insights. Rank your attributes. What do you think you do? 5 things you do. You write them down. And then you ask your customers, what's important to them? And I guarantee in many cases, what you think you do is not that important to why they buy. And that's why market research companies spend or charge you thousands to do that exercise, because they do it in nice focus groups and they sit people down and they say, hey, tell what you want this organization to do. And the mindset is completely different. We get stuck in our own ways. Sometimes we call it to be a little bit complacent. We're complacent in that we've always done it this way. And we keep thinking that this is what the market, our customers will want. No. Attributes are really important. It's one of the key areas that a marketing team should be working on. Attribute testing. What is the attributes in 2021 that help to reduce anxiety? So solutions, value. I'm going to talk a little bit this later. But we've got to move the narrative. Stop talking about price. As I said, Priceline.com. Name your price. Name your price. That basically says commoditization. What is value? There's a lot of work being done in professional services, accountants, etc., consultants. If you ever apply, if you ask a consultancy for a proposal, the first thing you'll do is go to the back page to see how much it costs. Yeah, it's normal. It's normal. So 60, 70 pages. Oh, so expensive. Doesn't fit in the budget. We have to put it through a machine. Too expensive. I don't know. Question mark. How much is it? How much is it worth? How much is it worth? How much is your travel worth? That's value selling. Not what the costs were plus the margin, what is value? So professional services firms are looking at quoting documents to third-party companies to sell their services on how much do you think it's worth? How much are you prepared to pay? Could we not see that with airlines? That's a 180-day difference to what Priceline.com said. Priceline said everybody's the same. You tell me I want to go London, New York, and I'll pay 100 euros each way. And Priceline would say, sorry, it's too, you weren't successful. Bid again, and you try again. And at some point you would get it, because there'll be the threshold on the revenue system that said we'll only sell at this minimum price. I don't see anybody saying how much is you willing to pay. What's it worth to you? The solution is the value. That's the difference. Remember, how much is that value worth as part of the solution? We talk about place. No, we talk about access. And I think one of the challenges, as we all know at the moment, is how to find passengers in their homes. We've got to get back into their networks. We can't, I said before about simplicity, try and build up that simplicity. And promotion, it's about information. It's all about storytelling. And again, trying to use your employees and use customer sentiments. Bring your employees and bring your customer sentiments together and inform the market that this is what we're doing to make your life easier and to remove and reduce your risk. Change the narrative on the anxiety. So it's quite simple. We talk about moving people through a series of stages. I don't want to dwell on this too much, but of course, what will be this in 2021? How can we try and help passengers recognize needs? How can we try and help passengers recognize needs? That's going to be an interesting question, because obviously back 18, 19, we were very willing to travel. We were discovering places. Will that change? So we need to help passengers recognize they need to travel. We need to tell them they need to travel. How can we ensure that the evaluation is available, but as we said with the studies of Edward de Bono, that there's no competition? They can try to find alternatives to you, but when you evaluate them, their value is not what is worth the construct to change. Purchasing, we mentioned previously, where are they? And of course, follow through implementation. This will be very crucial in a consultative approach, really trying to build a vision around what it is to make implementation. I think before I ask you for another series of votes, what we're really saying here is selling the way your customer wants to buy, not the way you like to sell. And that throws up a whole project of what is the future of online, offline. If we go back in the 90s, we started to see the emergence of the offline concept. We then call them OTAs. And that's been a lot of the drive of aviation in the last 20 years, to the extent where many airlines were using OTAs as an extension on the basis that that's where they felt customers were going. So it's easy, it's very easy to work with OTAs. So let's put our distribution into that mindset. How does that look versus you selling yourself? Why would you want to put people outside of your brand experience? It's a question that we all ask ourselves. Why do we want people to go away from our brand? Of course, people look for price comparisons, and going back to my narrative, commoditization. People want to see if they can get it cheaper, because they don't then think that what you offer is going to be different. So we're forcing people to go to channels where their first real vision is price and price. And how can we try to then use that and change the mindset? What about the offline channels? What about the travel agents? Are they with us in 2021? I hope so. I think they have a huge part to play in supporting the brand. They're an extension of the brand. Let's be honest. That's why we have trade relationships. We work with the trade and we support the trade to take our message to help build that story and build that trust out to the final consumer. So if we kill the travel agents, we reduce the ability to sell trust. Because if the travel agents are not then really selling your experience, or you're not supporting that experience, and you're sending them to channels where everybody's displayed on price, how does that look? Ancillaries, and it's something that we were talking with John, and I know John's been doing some studies around the project of ancillaries. If you look at a lot of the work that's been done here in Europe, particularly with the low-cost model, Ryanair, EasyJet, Wizz, they're up to somewhere around 40 euros in ancillary spend beyond fares. Can travel agents work with you to sell ancillaries? Are you selling ancillaries online? You can on your own platform, of course, because you can build the story. How easy is it to sell ancillaries through an OTA versus a travel agent? These will be things that you'll need to start looking at in trying to get the most out of each potential passenger. So there's a large debate, and I think if we go back to the end of 2019, the offline debate was challenged. We'd seen what happened here in Europe, and obviously in the United Kingdom with what went with Thomas Cook, and the fact that the travel agent concept was being challenged. But is that right in 2021? Is it time for the agents to come back through consultative selling, working with airlines, providing an extension of your own sales teams, that the agents are also part of your experience? Can that also be with OTAs? Question for you. So, John, I'm putting up a poll, please.
Yep.
If that's
So
okay.
this is,
and again, any questions? So
yeah,
we're asking you. Go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, there's some absolutely fantastic comments coming through. We're sort of consolidating them, and we'll bring them all together at the end. And I've actually got a couple of people that are going to come and join the conversation once everything's finished. Yeah. But yeah, just on your Ryanair, there was that time when Mr. O'Leary, the CEO, said there'll be a time when people don't have to pay us to fly. It will be free. The tickets will be free. And they used to do promotions in the newspaper for £1 tickets. And the whole idea was, if you're making X amount from ancillary sales and you've got load factors in the high 90%, I think, they have 95+% load factors most months on a huge network. It can be done, but it's how do we do that softly. And we've talked a lot. There's been a lot of conversations about NDC, the IATA distribution capability, implementing digital solutions, going direct, investing in an app that's user friendly, that allows people to really kind of get in there. So I guess, what I'm saying is that where Ryanair, Wizz Air, et cetera, is kind of an aspirational place to be, but we're a long way from that. And obviously there's still a high cost base. So we've got almost, I'm going to give it another 10 seconds, but any comments on that, Gavin?
Well, I suppose, yeah, I mean, on the ancillaries, John, I think what's interesting here, it's also coming back to what I mentioned before about people. This is a change of the way that we think about the roles of our teams. Let's think, where can an airline go beyond fare? Obviously, in the booking, you've got all the great opportunities with digitalization. Are you sure you don't want to take a bag? Are you sure you don't want insurance? So the algorithms are easy to do. And I think that's where a lot of work is being done today. Then the next time a passenger really can be sold something is when they go into the airport. And now you start to move into third-party companies or your own staff. How do you start to use the airport experience as a way to offer something for different potential travelers? Then you've got to go on board. And when you're on board, that's another huge opportunity to be selling. But that's a cultural change. As I said before, your people are there to deliver an experience. And we have there's a wonderful piece of consultancy work, what we call selling through service. So if you're really good at service, you actually sell. Nordstrom's, again, jumping around industries, but Nordstrom's was one of the Bainbridge, best customer service companies in the world. You know what this is, again, it's very kind of Anglo-Saxonic mentality, but the argument was, if you work in a shop and you walk up to a customer and you say to a customer, can I help you? Which is normal. Can I help you? What do I say? No, I'm just looking. So you've closed down any communication, because the whole point of employees is the ability to interact. It's what we discussed with, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, body language, and the ability to put yourself as if you're on the other side of the experience. So if I say to you, can I help you? No, just looking. I can't come back and ask you, can I help you? Because you'll think I'm silly. You've already been. So do you know what Nordstrom's did? They spent a lot of money researching. You don't say, can I help you? You actually say, can I answer a question? Can I answer a question? Think about it. Psychologically, it's completely different, because you don't say no.
Absolutely.
The mind doesn't say no to can I answer a question. So the relationship has not been closed down. And that's the power of neuro-linguistic programming. And hotels were doing a lot of this. Marriott, Spirit to Serve program, leading projects in NLP, and the way that the receptionist engaged with the passenger, the hotel guest to check in. Do we do that in aviation? Do I remember talking about, we talk about online check-in. We're killing areas of experience. Now, obviously, will that come back? Social distancing, etc. So I think, it said there's interesting discussions, and that's probably a whole other area about the whole concept of employees and service experiences. So what have we got here, John? Just concluding, about 63% going on the web.
Yeah,
of course, and that helps us sell ancillaries, the algorithms we've just been discussing, etc., building trust, storytelling, putting the package together. And of course, the OTAs, it's around 25%. So I'm a little bit, I'm not seeing enough. Only 5% of you would like to work with the trade. So sorry, travel agency, if you're there, maybe you can defend. I try to defend you a little bit. I think, travel agents can be an interesting, I'm not going to go into the challenges that airlines faced back in March, April, May, June. We all know that. It was unprecedented. Sorry, again, having to say it. What was the role of a travel agent and all of that? Help the passenger. Get the passenger out of the mess. Mm. And that was, of course, what travel agents said, I'm not selling. All I'm doing is helping. I'm helping. And it's something to think about. Okay. Any other comments before we...
No, that's great. I think there's a couple of things on that. One is, that's maybe what we would like to see, as opposed to what's going to happen immediately. But something I'm really interested in is, what percentage of airlines in Africa actually have a digital app? What has, to make it frictionless, to bring that digital experience whenever I travel, around the world. And I know I'm actually interviewing a gentleman from Ethiopian next week to talk about this and the difference that's made and some of the things. And that's got to be a shortcut. And if you haven't got one, you're an airline out there. Everybody, there are people who are going to be flying with your airline have access to a mobile phone. And if you make the interface nice, so they don't have to do it through a web browser, but they can actually, they can book on through an app. I think that will make a big difference. So, I think there's lots of questions around this. So let's see. But back to you.
Yeah, I've got 10 minutes more, really, John. And the last one is this idea about re-energizing the brand. And of course, branding, we could be here for 3 days in a masterclass on branding. But I think it just kind of concludes what I've been mentioning over the last 45 minutes or so. The question at the moment is, do you build a new brand? Do you say to yourself how to sustain the brand? Where we were in 19, what our values were, where we were seeing, is that now what we see as the fourth quarter of 2020? Do we need to change? So ask yourself, do you sustain where you are, or do you use this pandemic and what we've been highlighting as a way to reimagine your brand? This comes to two key areas. One is the employees, and how can they help to understand the challenges that they're seeing, and that's in all of the different touch points, be it airports, on board, contact centers, etc. Let's start really listening to the people that work for us, because we need to take that information and we need to understand the sentiments from customers. What are they telling us? What do they want us to? How do they see us? How can we work between the customer and our employee to kind of reimagine what we want to be known for? And does that help us to kind of be away from our potential competitors? I see it in two areas. I think, as I said earlier, we've got to stop shouting. We've got to tone down the message. We were shouting in the 90s, and we now need to reflect. We need to show care and concern. We need to understand that this is changing the world. But we also need to realize that aviation is a driver of what the world was looking for: discovery and feeling, getting, learning and sharing. We need customers and we need our communities to be able to really help us focus back our brand message, trying to put the value in what we're doing to support the industry. It's a little bit about saying, you know, we want to be we want to change the way people think about travel. And maybe this is not to be done on your own. Maybe this is a time where we could look for some partnerships. Not financial, but, you know, we talk about competing with each other, but also we do need to share ideas. We need to come up with a vision that together we get through this, and we're getting through it to make the people feel that the industry is taking the situation seriously. And I think the ability, you know, we talk about the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Synergy is what people talk about. It's time for synergy. Let's share ideas across. And secondly, it's about being agile. Listen to your people. Spend time with your people. You know, there's a lot of huge amounts of case studies on company turnarounds. I remember, John, one close to your part of the world, the north of England, and you know, there was probably one of the most interesting case studies I ever read was about a supermarket group where the CEO and the board of directors used to play five-a-side football. And they said, you know, when we went out onto the football pitch to play all against the store managers, the guys working in the warehouses, etc., there was no hierarchy. And what we learned, getting back with our people in a different way, spending time with our employees without the hierarchy, was what actually helped to turn around. The case study was Asda. Asda was bought by Walmart, you know, the biggest resale company in the world. So, you know, there's a lot we can do with our people. And like I say, I don't want to go off. It's part of competitiveness, but it's a whole industry in its own. Try and reimagine a brand. Don't think we can come back. And it's the final couple of thinking here. You know, when we think about value as an organization, we have this lovely value construct. How much did it cost, and how is our margin? You know, the accountants call this cost plus pricing. So what was our costs? How much is our margin? That's what we sell at. And that's the company's vision about pricing travel. As I said before, what the professional services firms are saying is, don't price. Try and understand what your prospect is prepared to pay for the value difference between us and the second best competitor. That's the part that we're trying to discover. What is your worth? Are you worth it? If you don't have worth, you just have commodity. And then it's about being the cost leader. But I think what that then says is that there are times when we don't deliver the value and we're not worth it. We could have bought somebody else. And that's something we have to now try and understand as we move forward. How to remove this negative customer margin, the perception that we overcharge, we don't deliver value. Well, we need to understand what, as I said about the marketing guys, rank your attributes. What are you selling? And what you sell, how valuable is that to the people that are going to pay for it? That's a simple exercise. Yes, you can bring in the market research agencies, but you can also do it yourselves. Try and define what you think are your key differences. What are your attributes? And then try to find out, do your passengers believe that you deliver on those benefits? And see what the outcomes will be. Conclusion is quite simple. As Jack Welch is very famous saying, if you don't have a competitive advantage, don't compete. What am I saying to conclude? This is difficult for everybody. We all know that. And, you know, from the great work of Aviation and with Airlines, you know, we've got to all share and work the best way we can. We've got to have action. We've got to change that narrative, as I keep saying, from purpose in words to purpose in action. What are we doing to remove anxiety? How are we trying to show we're different? And we're not different on the basis what we think is different, but what you, the passengers, need from us. Secondly, it's about stop telling, but act as leaders. Change the industry. It's time for the airlines to be together to create vision and challenge the toothpaste discussion and challenge Priceline.com that all of you are worth what the customer's prepared to pay. No. What the customer is willing to pay for the value difference that they see as being important. And that's a conclusion. It's a shared agenda. The brand is about being with the community. This is something that we were when branding was really driving in the 90s, there was a lot of talk about building brands around the experience, building brands around the dimension of togetherness. And that kind of went a little bit out. It's time to bring that back. Shared agendas are very important. And that might be that, yes, you share ideas with competitors, but if together we can make differences, then that's also important to change our industry. The conclusion, and what I'd like you to finalize, is what may get in the way. You're the expert, the people who are, thank you for coming on from all parts of the world, but for those specifically from the African region, what is it that might get in the way of airlines, be it your airline, or if you're working with airlines, what is it that might get in the way of what I've just tried to say? What might stop rebuilding purpose? And how can these airlines create togetherness? How you do that? There are particular ways of doing it. What gets in the way? It's quite simple. Our culture. We've always done it this way. Why would we change? Well, maybe the pandemic forces us to change. The next one is our structure. We're too big. We're too big to change. We're too big to rebuild. We can't do that. It's never going to work. We tried it before. Never worked. We've got so many costs associated where we've been that if we now change, what happens to all those costs? So, but also what happens with other interests? We become a little bit conceitful. It's time, we have the expression, throw the baby out with the bathwater. Is it time to really understand where we've come from? And as I said, we talk about adversity. This is normally adversity. This is more than adversity. What we've got to try and understand is how we re-energize the purpose of the sector and the purpose of my role in delivering that difference. And at that point, John, I will ask you to open up the third poll, please. And at that point, then the floor is, and I will stop sharing my screen, bring John back and Nadia back to the table.